can you educate people enough, and can you make it compelling enough for them to be interested so they can help towards compliance?
How is it that even though we have all these rules of compliance, like something like CrowdStrike still happens?
Obviously, to be compliant, there's a huge human factor in between of you saying, okay, I'm going to be compliant. This is how I'm going to be compliant. And here we go, compliant.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Summer of Atlassian. Today we got Dimitris from Upscale, and we're going to be talking about upskill and compliance. So Dimitris, thanks for coming on.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me. Well, thank you to Andy, our common friend
A
who
special
put
thank
us
you to
together.
Andy. Yeah.
That out. It's a shameless one. Thank you to him, and thank you for having me again. I've seen your stuff.
Andy's network is just crazy. It's unmatched in the Atlassian ecosystem.
It is. But I can say the same for you.
I don't know. I feel like I don't know as many. I mean, I know people now, but
Yeah.
I think Andy knows people, but also has relationships with everybody.
Well, it's two people versus me that is quite new to the ecosystem. So I'm thankful. Like, I've been with Upscale and Adaptivist less than a year. So the ecosystem is quite new to me, and I'm quite fortunate that I came across Andy early in my ecosystem journey, and even luckier that he's put me in front of you and the audience, and getting a platform to talk about stuff.
Cool. Well, why don't we kick off with what do you do at Upscale?
Oh God! All right. So
what don't you do? Let me rephrase. What don't you do at Upscale?
A bit of context. Upscale launched in February, and Upscale is part of Adaptivist, the tag group. What we do at Upscale, basically, obviously everyone kind of already in the ecosystem knows Adaptivist, right? Script runner.
It's hard not to.
Script runner. And Upscale was basically another business unit that kind of naturally came to be. It is probably the brainchild of our product leader, Yari, and the leadership team. So at Upscale, obviously as a business unit, we can say, hey, we're gonna try and make another script runner, but script runner is one in a million. It's really hard to actually recreate, whether you're Adaptivist or any other kind of business. So Upscale kind of focuses more on creating smaller apps that will address all the pain points, all the issues. Try and create apps that will make everyone's life a bit more pleasant in their day-to-day work, because work is 8-9 hours a day of our life. So what we try to do, especially for the Atlassian ecosystem, is make apps that make your life easier, I guess.
That's
So,
a very, very noble.
I guess it is. Let me just say that. Yeah. Okay. Money is a big thing, right? In any business. But honestly, the group that has gathered at Upscale kind of really feels the whole motto of trying to create a better everyday work life for everyone, and me specifically, because I'm in the product marketing side. And I think, like, my whole career has been surrounded by customers and trying to understand customers better, and being new in the ecosystem, it's me trying to understand exactly what the pains and struggles of the ecosystem are, and trying to address that.
So speaking of which, I think there's a great transition. So pains of the ecosystem, compliance.
Well,
How do you feel about that? Is that a pain point?
big thing. The compliance is becoming really, really, really big. To point that the team went to be more specific. Now we focus on the InfoSec and compliance side of things at Upscale. So that was a nice plug on your part, because compliance. So I went to the
That's my
information,
job.
yeah,
What I do.
security expo in London. Was it a month ago? Should have been a month ago.
Okay.
And we got talking to people, and apparently the size of it, you'd expect that compliance was always a big thing and always a big theme throughout the years. But no, this was the first year where compliance became a major, major, major thing. And we can see a lot of it in probably the ecosystem, but we can see it all over, even outside the ecosystem. And I think it has to do a lot with the rise of AI and the ability for people to use LLMs, and probably, I'm not an expert, but probably what's happening here is we've identified ways to take the LLMs and use it in our benefit and make the manual tasks of compliance, because it is quite a manual process, uh, cut corners in a way and automate a lot of things and make our life easier. So yeah, compliance. Now, for the ecosystem specifically, um, when was it? I think it was the 17th. Was it the announcement? Oh, the 16th of July. So for example, they announced the FedRAMP marketplace
Mhm.
process status, which is great. And you look at compliance overall, and you go into the community for Atlassian, and everyone's very, very specific for compliance, and it's growing. It's like you see apps now that are being created that are trying to target compliance specifically.
How much of that do you think, though, is the fact that data center is where you're at if compliance is important?
Oh, I wanna tread carefully here.
Okay. Let's not get you fired.
No, data center is super important for the time being. We know that Atlassian is trying to shift and move a lot of people to cloud, which
Right,
is
which is why, again, things like FedRAMP is uber critical.
exactly, which is great. But I don't want to say I don't think we're there, but I think there's a long journey to be had to
I
go.
wouldn't even say just long, it's a long uphill journey.
I'll be honest. Like, I've had those discussions with a lot of people, and we're discussing, okay, server end of life. Now, what's next? And there's a big push for cloud, and that's great, because there's a lot of progress to be made on that side, and data center is still live and kicking, and it will be for the next 6-7 years. Um, yeah.
Not as optimistic as the ones I've heard. I've heard at least the next 10 years.
All right. I'll
But
try. I'm trying to get a middle ground, right?
but let me just, I love stirring the pot here a little bit, right? So data center, in my opinion, is where you go to if compliance is high on your list of priorities, like here in the United States, defense contractors, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not associated in any way, right? But I used to work at Boeing, right? But these companies, they'll never go to cloud, at least not in its current version, right?
That's happening. Yeah.
But
Security above
right,
everything.
right. But that's the part. That's kind of the pot I wanted to stir is when you look at the advisory bulletins that Atlassian publishes
Yep.
weekly,
Yeah.
all the problems are in data center, right? Like I feel like you're caught between a rock and a hard place.
No, I think it's like, for us at least, it's not just upscale, and it's not just me. I think for everyone that's creating third-party apps or has services that they provide for data center, it's a matter of figuring out what the right solutions are. I like to say we're a brand within a brand, right? So everyone's a brand within Atlassian, the ecosystem. And like, Atlassian is doing the best that they can, I guess, with what they have. But we're also part of that ecosystem. We're also part of that journey, and like, we push the narrative. Try and push it as much as we can to see where we can develop things in data center.
Talking a little bit more about FedRAMP, like assuming Atlassian gets it at
Yeah.
some point, how does that impact these companies like Upscale and Adaptivist?
That's great. So just for a bit of context, like I like going into the community, and I like stirring the pot, as you said, sometimes, and like going into the discussions and just like, hey, when are we gonna have this? We want to know. But weirdly enough, today, So I've had that discussion about FedRAMP for quite some time, and I've had the discussion about uh, public sector in the US quite a bit because, well, for us, and I think for everyone that wants to work in the ecosystem, the US public sector is a huge opportunity for everyone.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's enormous. Like you get the stamp of approval,
It's almost
public.
like free money
Yeah.
at this point.
Oh my God, I'm killing it.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think you just need one
yeah,
client, right?
there you
You're
go.
done. You're set.
Approved. But to answer your question, today I went through like ChatGPT and looking at Gemini and trying to figure out, all right, Atlassian, in process status on the FedRAMP marketplace. What does that mean for upscale and every third party company that tries to build something for that ecosystem? And like, we don't really know yet, but obviously the goal, there's a preset of steps you can go through and try and get to that status, that authorization.
Right.
But
But
like,
that's the kind of the question, right? Does
yeah,
adaptivists need to get FedRAMP certified as well?
it'd be great if we could, but probably not. I think based on what we have, you just need to follow a few instructions, be secure enough for them to say you're good, and you can piggyback off the
That's
FedRAMP
but that's
marketplace.
dangerous though, because couple of things that come to mind with what you just said. But the first one I want to start off with, FedRAMP, I feel like it's such a US thing, right? It's
Yeah.
public sector, US public sector, as you mentioned, right? My observations of the Alaskan ecosystem, most companies are not US based.
Um,
Isn't that a conflict?
that's fair. I think the U.S. is a huge market. It's a big opportunity.
I agree, but US public sector is very specific.
It is very specific.
And dealing with foreign contacts is very, very specific as well.
I'll just say like this. This is a shameless marketing thought, right? How stringent are the rules that the public sector set for the U.S. to be able to work within the public sector?
I would say
Quite.
they're very stringent.
Yeah. I could probably upskill, and every upskill can probably utilize that in their value propositions, in their tactics, and say, you know what, I can probably sell in the majority of places and say I'm secure. I'm secure enough for the U.S. public sector to say you're good. And I won't even touch on that. It's a small sector, but you can go to other compliance issues like GDPR and say, all right, Europe, well, you got other issues there. And you can go to other markets in Asia, probably you'll find other regulations there. It's a matter of what you want to do and how you want to approach it. But like for us, it's just probably constant battle in a sense to try and navigate the whole ecosystem.
So do you ever think that like the government will, any government for that matter, whether it's US based or European based or any world based government, do you think that they can overextend and stop innovation?
That's a deep question.
Because GDPR, right? Like GDPR, like you look at Apple basically saying, we're not shipping Atlassian intelligence in Europe.
It's a deep question. I don't think I'm the right person to really
But
answer
what are
that.
your thoughts?
But
What are your, in my
my
opinion, thoughts?
my thoughts are is that usually the market is big enough that it kind of finds its way. Like regulations will be regulations, and hopefully governments and the regulations that are imposed are in benefit of the people. And obviously, I don't want my data being breached. No one wants their data being breached. Everyone wants to be secure. And hopefully, those regulations reflect that. But does that slow down innovation? Probably to some extent. Um, but what people are really good at is finding ways to work around that.
Work
So,
around the rules. Now, like, what do you think about this CrowdStrike incident that we had
oh
over
yeah,
here?
that was crazy.
That to me feels like software development
Yeah,
is a very well thought out process by now.
Yeah,
In the year 2024, I think we've got like a DevOps
you've peaked.
methodology. Like it's pretty well documented, right? In other words, if you're changing code in production without doing any testing, like what are you doing? Hence compliance, right?
Yeah.
How is it that even though we have all these rules of compliance, like something like CrowdStrike still happens?
So I was looking at a few statistics today, right? I'll give you a statistic. 73% of all data breaches involve human element. And obviously, to be compliant, there's a huge human factor in between of you saying, okay, I'm going to be compliant. This is how I'm going to be compliant, and here we go, compliant. CrowdStrike, for example, is
It's a compliance tool, ironically.
right. It happened, and it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with um, us trying to push the boundaries too quickly, and sometimes it's more of a competitive edge kind of thing where mistakes are bound to happen. Now, who's to blame? You and me, and probably the majority of people will never know. But it did happen, right? And to your point, like we've reached peak DevOps, we've reached peak of programming, and it's gone full circle where you're like, you'd think that things like this can't happen, but human error.
Yeah,
It
but you gotta imagine that world governments are gonna be involved
Oof.
at
Yeah.
that point, right?
Now,
And so
now,
more compliances will come out of this event.
yes, yes. More compliance will come out of this. Something will definitely go down in history where we'll say, okay, now we need to be compliant ready for this because of CrowdStrike in 2024. You're like,
Right.
how can upscale help? How can any upscale help? Right? It's just a matter of figuring out what that will be. And
Yeah, you almost need like a checklist, like a safety checklist of like, okay, are we GDP or are
yeah,
we CrowdStrike safe? Are
yeah,
we, all the other mistakes that have happened over the years? Like you just need like kind of like Sonar Cube, but for compliance.
you 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 can put all the safety nets in place. You can make sure that everything is working to perfection. Um, Usually it's the human error, that the human factor that you can't really control, and it happens. It's
So where do you see AI then coming into helping us with this
oh,
human
very
element problem?
very very early days of AI, and like I think we're all hyped and we're all on the bandwagon and we're trying to figure it out, make the most of AI. But definitely we'll start developing to a point where it will be so automated that we'll be happy, but we need to make sure that that automation also works in the right way.
Right. At what point do we lose control?
Are we talking about Terminator levels or
Yeah. At what point do we, because I mean, if you think about it, I know it's a slippery slope, right?
yeah,
But you have human error today.
yep,
AI comes in to help us with res- help
right,
us minimize human error,
right.
right? It automates the tedious tasks. It automates the stuff that is error prone, right? I'm assuming at some point AI is going to look at this code and go, I remember the year 2024.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's fix this
This
line of
was
code here, right? And then at what point does it start like fixing and fixing and fixing and fixing to the point where it's made its own thing?
uh I think we'll reach a point where from compliance being super manual to a point where we won't probably require a lot of people, if any, to go through a checklist of what your compliance needs are,
Yeah, I mean, and
and
we have
boxes.
versions of that already, right? Like every time I upload a video to YouTube, it goes through a copyright check,
Yeah,
which I'm assuming a human is not sitting there watching a 1 hour long video because the compliance check takes 10 seconds.
Yeah, and compliance now, I said compliance is very manual, and we've spoken to a lot of people in the past 6 months around compliance and trying to understand like, what their problems are, what their pains are. And I think a lot of people that work around compliance would agree with me is that it's manual. And it's been manual because not a lot of investment has gone into compliance in the past years. But now that's changing.
What do you think that governments should have a role in compliance, in dictating what happens or what compliance rules and laws are set or created?
I'll say something, but I'll
Let's not also get in an orange jumpsuit as well.
try and be kind
Not,
about it.
like, not only do we not want to get fired, but we also don't want to go to jail. So
Yeah, that's true. But I'll just say that hopefully, again, governments work to an extent where everything is in control and under control for us to do our jobs better,
but
right?
that assumes that they know what is control and what is not control.
Yes, and I think a government per se does not know. They would need to collaborate, work with people that do know, and hopefully that's what a government is
So do we
comprised of.
have a council of compliances?
In the US, I don't.
Is there a world council of software compliance?
Probably not, but I think there's like a lot of people that would be experts and advise them, speak with them. Like
I don't know because when we watch here, at least here in the United States, you watch our government, our Congress interview or try to intimidate Mark Zuckerberg
right,
and Chew from TikTok, and they're talking about the basic concepts of Wi-Fi, and
yeah,
nobody knows what Wi-Fi how it works.
and that's one of the things, right?
And
I don't
yet
want,
you are required to make a law on how to store passwords of Wi-Fi.
and that's where I want to get. Do we trust? We're going to get political, but do we trust? Do we trust not the U.S. government, any government?
That's not some AA government.
Say, you know what? We've put a lot of thought in this, and what we're going to do is we're going to collect a lot of people that know the industry, know what needs to be done, and we'll do it right. Like I'm from Greece, like the majority of things aren't done right, but
Why do
hope,
you think? Why do
hope.
you think that is, though?
Uh, why do governments
No,
not?
no, no. Why are things not done right? Why do we make so many mistakes? We're having deep conversations here.
Yeah, this is very deep, but this is good. I think like in human nature, we try to get things done, and not always do we do it in the right way. Depends on who you have in that position of decision
How,
making.
how much of it is budgets and schedule that impact?
I think a lot of it is budget and scheduling. From a compliance perspective, if we look at it from a business perspective, right? How focused have businesses always been around compliance? You start a business. I started a business yesterday, right? Is my focus on compliance?
No,
Probably.
it's getting started and then
Yeah.
not getting your hand slapped.
And you grow it and you grow it and you grow it, and that probably is still the case. You want to be kind of reactive but never proactive around compliance, and you just try and not get fined.
That's what I was
But
going to say. So how much of compliance is ignorance because you just don't know, right? Because many a times I started my business here in the U.S. and the first couple of years were just like fee after fee after fee, where I'm like, I didn't even know I had to do this.
yeah, a lot of it is a lot of it is kind of learning as you go and not really being aware of it. And I think we touched on this. I think it's also kind of an education around compliance. Okay, I live in Europe, I live in the UK, and regulations are quite a big thing. But how educated am I on compliance? Like, okay, now it's part of my work, so I'm learning a lot and I'm learning fast. But am I a compliance manager? Am I a security manager? No. Is my day to day focused around compliance? No. Um, I know a few things, but I'm just one person and you're just one person. The majority of people that work in companies have zero knowledge around compliance if you're not a compliance
Yeah,
manager or a
but
security.
that's the interesting part, right? Because again, I come from heavily regulated industries,
Yep.
right, where compliance. I mean, we have a dictionary of compliances, right? Like forget just one rule. Like we have an entire like 10,000 page book on rules, right? And it's usually, and I think there's a two-part series here where careers in compliance management
Yeah.
and budgets in compliance management, right? I've usually seen it from my experience, like you have that one or two poor individuals that drew the short stick and have to do the job,
Yep.
right? So there's not, so they hate it, right? So when you don't care for it, you're just checking check boxes,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's not critical, and sometimes sometimes for compliance you gotta go beyond the surface, right? Like I can give you a facade and tell you everything's perfect. I think we see that with like Boeing,
Right.
where everything is perfect. I think we see that with other companies that claim
Yeah.
here we are compliant, but if you just peek enough, you'll see the circus behind.
The chaos. Yeah. The chaos.
So what do you think about that?
Again, I'm gonna come around the whole manual thing, right? And very little focus, having gone into compliance for many, many years. Um, that's short straw that you mentioned. Like, hopefully, someone that does compliance likes what he
Enjoy
does.
their job.
Hopefully, one would hope. Like I've come across quite a few people, and they were very knowledgeable, and thankfully, the people that I have come across love their
There's
job.
okay, so maybe there's competency, which maybe you're competent at it, but the amount of hate that you get too, right? Because like when you're compliance, right? Your job is to basically tell a very smart individual, a developer, Ivy League university degrees, ego the size of Texas.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
understand that none of these references mean anything to people outside the United States, but when we
probably.
talk about Texas, we're talking about really, really big egos, right? And how are you supposed to tell these people, like, oh yeah, your code sucks, dude?
Well, ego checks, I guess, but everyone has their place and everyone has to do a job. And if I'm a superstar developer and I came from a STEM background in one of the Ivy Leagues in the US and I have an ego so big that, you know what, I don't want to be told off from a security manager or compliance manager. Well, it's up to the company to put in those check boxes and those processes.
But companies don't care. They don't
Well,
care. They don't care until something like CrowdStrike happens. I
yes,
guarantee you. I guarantee you, that whole CrowdStrike people they're having a kumbaya moment.
and that's and I circle back to what I said about being reactive, right? Compliance is quite a reactive thing in a lot of companies, and why? That's like major.
because
It's
it's at least here in the U.S., right? It's profit over short
yeah,
term profit over long term profit, right? Like you see this with Boeing in those doors that popped off, right? Like you got to imagine how many rules and regulations from the FAA, federal, or whatever avionics people, right? The people that control, make sure the planes can fly. How
yeah,
many rules they have to make sure, and the safeties and the checks and the balances of making sure every screw is screwed on, only for them to go do an audit and realize, dang, half the screws aren't even screwed on here.
yeah. Well, exactly that. And I, this is a shameless plug, but again, this is you're saying things, and in my mind as a marketer, I'm like, see, the ego. How can I address the Ivy League ego, right? How can I make compliance work for everyone, right?
You
And I
make
think,
it unagnostic to emotion.
yeah, it's not fun, right? It's not a fun thing. Let's be honest. Like, it's great and it's necessary, but it's not fun. But it's necessary to the point where if you have it, you avoid things like CrowdStrike, the CrowdStrike incident, or future events like that. Um, but yeah, in my mind, I'm like, how can I make it pleasurable for everyone? And how can I make it easy to implement?
That's why it almost needs to be built in natively. I think this is where AI is going to be play such a critical role, right? Because it's almost gonna have to be like like that Google check, right? Where
Yeah.
as you're building your code, it's got to go through those compliance checks automatically for you, either fix them on your behalf or make the recommendations of what you need to fix.
Yeah. But yeah, you go into the whole AI thing and you're like, is this really is this really the route I want to go down? Like you have to be you have to be really careful also. Like you also I come back to that. You need to be super knowledgeable, right? You need to speak to the right people and have the right minds to give you the information to actually build that. Like yeah, we have a great team, but do we know how to really, really build something like that? Probably, yeah. But do we want AI doing all of it? Don't know yet. We'll need to
We
figure
don't
that
know.
one out.
And it's gonna come into budgets too. I think a lot of companies that I've seen historically, right, especially ones with all the hacks and stuff, you don't have the budget today, so
Yeah.
you turn the cheek the other way and hope that it doesn't happen to you. But I almost see like there's no consequences, right? Like even when we look at CrowdStrike, what's the consequence of shooting or shutting down half the world?
Well, I haven't like what are they gonna do to CrowdStrike? Probably nothing.
Right. And what did they do to AT&T and T-Mobile and all these companies that Sony and all these companies that got hacked? Like, what do you do? Like, there's nothing. Have you seen Silicon Valley, the show?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. There's a I think it was like season 3 or season 4 where they get quote unquote hacked. The guy
right.
accidentally he put his tequila on top of the delete key and started deleting all the files. Right. But before that, he made a comment of like, guys, if we don't get hacked, we're not cool. Like you're only cool in when you get hacked.
Yeah, like what is it? 3 in 10 companies in like in the past year have had some sort of breach, which is really crazy. Like
Right.
three, 3 out of 10, like some sort of breach. Okay, yeah, you're not cool if you don't get breached. Someone targeted you.
So then that goes back to GDPR, right? Like so assuming everybody's been like I think that there's like a website where you can see how many times your email or password have been discovered or sold on the dark web, right? Something like that. There's some sort of a website where you can see the vulnerability of your password,
Yeah,
right?
I use the tool basically to try and clean my email from databases, so they stop selling stuff to me.
Right.
Like
But
Jesus.
but now so again so if you have GDPR, so being compliant with GDPR is expensive,
Yep.
right? Not only is it expensive, but it's also again handicapping, right? Like you can't do certain things. Like we go back to half of Europe or most of Europe is not going to have um, Atlassian or Apple Intelligence, right?
Right.
Because it's not
Right.
GDPR compliant. So not only is our civilizations or society is going to start losing benefit because I get GDPR has great or has it has good intentions,
Yes.
right? But does it matter when the companies that you're placing these strict GDPR rules on get hacked anyways, and your private information is out there anyways?
Uh,
Does privacy matter? I guess is what I'm trying to say at this point, where all everybody's information has ever been on the internet is on the internet.
to be fair, like yeah, like you say, my privacy matters, and you're on like 50 platforms, and you're just showcasing your life and trying to be as present as possible. But uh, I'll put this in another way. If we didn't have GDPR, how bad would it be? Seeing that now we already have such regulations like GDPR and things like that still happen. Like if we didn't have it, my question would be, what would be happening?
What would be? I've never
Total
thought
chaos?
about
Would
that.
it be total chaos? Would it be companies saying, you know what? I have no regulation to follow, so I'm gonna go crazy. Um,
But don't we ultimately, as a society, get to pick what is or isn't good for us? But I guess that's not true because we get to go to the super grocery store and buy whatever we want, whether it's
yeah,
healthy or
we
unhealthy.
yeah, we also vote too, and we don't tend to make great decisions when voting either sometimes. So
So we'll be responsible for our own demise.
yeah, it's basically educating everyone
Did you
around these matters, right? It's a matter of education and it's a matter of understanding. And I'm not saying, oh, you have to be educated to a level of a compliance manager, a security manager, but you need to be aware enough to understand the implications and
Right.
why these exist and why they're super important. And they are.
Little side story, but very much related. You go to teams this year in Vegas?
No, no,
Okay.
no,
Have
no.
you heard of the Sphere?
I left it for the cool people.
You left it for the cool people.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the Sphere in Las Vegas?
Yes, I have.
So inside they have some concerts, but they also have like a movie. It's like a 45-minute movie you can watch.
Mhm.
Very immersive. Shout out to my my buddies over at Revise. They sent me over, but I walked out of that. It's I forgot the title of the show. They only have one show,
Yeah.
but I walked out of that screening so depressed and lost all hope in humanity because the whole premise of it is, have you seen the movie Wall-E?
Yes.
It's basically Wall-E. It's basically the story of how we got to Wall-E, which is like we're humans. We got corrupted. We had violence. We had wars. We had just inhumane things to that we drove ourselves to extinction.
Yeah.
Few select individuals were selected and they went off into space, Wally, and now they shipped these two humans to basically restart life.
Right.
And in that, and as these humans are coming, not to spoil anybody who's going to go pay the $50, $75 to go watch this at the Sphere, but you go for the visual, not for the
Yeah.
storyline, right? But these two people, right, as they're coming to life, they're shown from the moment the first microbe started all the way through that fall of humanity. They show them everything, and including all the bad parts. And so I just wonder, like, how far away are we from this like dystopia where like we're just gonna like it's
Uh,
gonna
yeah,
it's
I
gonna down
don't
snowball.
I hope we're far, far, far from it. You know, we've made we've made a lot of progress in a very short period of time. And you know, what's the saying? Tough times create tough people. Tough people
No,
create.
tough times. Yeah, no, tough
What's
times.
the saying? I don't want to ruin
People.
it.
No, yeah. So hard times create strong men. Strong
Yep.
men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak
There you
men
go.
create hard times.
There you go. Thank you for not allowing me to say it and make a fool of myself. But you know where I was going, so thanks. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we're heading down that path. We have a tendency to go full circle, so we might be seeing things in a certain way now, but I th-
May-
we'll be all
Yeah.
right.
So maybe we can pivot to something maybe not as depressing, right? But
Yeah,
I think
yeah, yeah.
I
Or
think
political.
budgets play a huge role in this compliance stuff, right? And I kind of want to go dig a little deeper. Just how do you how if you're running a company, how do you determine how much to invest into compliance?
If I were running a company, right, I'd need. Well, that's an educational thing right there. You're putting me on the spot, right? So, what do
That
I
was
need?
the purpose of this interview, right?
What do I need? So the question is, what do I need to be compliant against, right?
Well,
And
every day more things. So
yeah, every day more things, and that's fine because I'm not the only one that needs to be compliant around those things. Um, but again, I think it falls into like you have to have it as part of your core business decisions, and like even your finance team needs to be aware, like, oh, these are the costs for compliance, and they're imperative. They need to be part of, the financials, and they need to be there. And I think only then, when it starts being part of the like core decision making, right? Compliance. All right, we need to put a lump sum against that every year because we want to be compliant. We want to work towards it, and we want to build.
but but compliance is very much like insurance.
Yeah,
You don't appreciate it until you actually need it.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And
And
that's such a tough that's such an overhead budget to worry about, right? Because you do not get or see a direct output of your compliance
I
until you need it, and you're like, oh, thank
Yeah,
you, I had it.
that's where hopefully compliance managers that love their job, can make a case and, build a environment within a company that, they can talk about it and they can say, listen, we really need this, because X, Y, and Z, and we need X amount of money. And they need to be part of that conversation with the stakeholders,
Yeah,
within a company.
but so I guess we could pivot a little bit into education
Yeah.
of, okay, so let's just say we get a budget. We know we need to be compliant, or we know that compliance is high, right? But we said it at the beginning, and I think it's that common theme, right? Like the biggest violation of compliance is that human error aspect of it, right? So how do we help the human error part?
Uh, I'll give you an example, right? Um, we all start a new job and we have to go through security training, right? How many times have you done that security training, and how much have you learned from that security training?
Not
The
because
only,
it's almost numb.
the only thing that we do when we have that security training is try and go as quickly as possible through it to say that you did it, so you can move on with your life and get to the really meaty stuff of your job, right? I think because we're talking about the educational side now, it's so boring that no one wants to spend time to do it. We need to, like, I know there are a few companies that have tried and are trying to make it more pleasant, gamify it, and make it part of, a little journey day by
I
day.
I
To
almost feel like, have you seen the US version of The Office, not the UK one?
Yes, I have. That's
The one where
arguably
Dwight's
it's
got that,
it's the best one.
the the US one or the UK one?
The US one is the
Okay.
best one.
But there's a scene, there's a famous scene where Dwight's teaching everybody fire safety,
Yes.
what to do in case of a fire, and nobody read the manual, nobody did anything. And so the guy goes, and again, not to spoil
Yeah,
anything, but he
I
sets
know.
off the fire alarm, but he booby trapped everything just to see how everybody would react. And I kind of feel like we need more of that.
I think we do. I think, yeah, we do. Because again, like, where I wanted to get with this is, like, you have security being such a major thing for so long, and still you're at a very, very dangerous level with a lot of people that have gone through security training many times. And that's basically compliance right there. Can you educate people enough, and can you make it compelling enough for them to be interested so they can help towards compliance? Because if it's only up to the two, three, four compliance managers that are part of a company, it gets increasingly difficult.
Yeah, I don't know, like I feel like the gamification of it has to play a huge role, because like you said, every time I've joined a company, it's like you push through that training, and and not only is the training important, or training is important,
Yeah,
but the actors are getting better and better every day,
yeah,
right? Like getting like a phishing email. I just got one from a senior person in a
yeah,
company the other day, and I'm staring at it. Like it had an attachment. It was a whole CrowdStrike thing, right? Like I woke up in the morning not knowing CrowdStrike had happened,
yeah,
and I wake up to this email from, again, a high profile individual, and it's got, like, the email is just the image, so that's no text, no context. It looks legit.
yeah, yeah,
Summary line says CrowdStrike something, and I'm like, well, I don't even know what CrowdStrike was up until last Monday,
yeah.
right?
You're like, what?
And then and then the image itself has instructions in English, but it's like a picture of an email. And
Right.
in that picture of that email, the phone and the language of that phone is in a foreign language. And so I'm like, this looks so shady. So shady. And but I'm checking all my normal checks. Are like, you're checking for the spot checks, you're sending the to, you're sending the from, you're checking all the stuff for the phishing. And I'm certified ethical hacker. And so I'm like, I would like to say that I take a little bit of pride in,
Yeah,
like, my maybe I'll fall victim still, but my spidey
yeah,
sensors are usually a little bit more in tuned than other people, right?
yeah.
And so I'm looking at this, and I stared at it for a good solid 5 minutes, and then I clicked on it because I'm like, ah, screw it.
That's you though, right? That's just you. Like imagine now company you have a company like CrowdStrike or like Microsoft, and you have 100,000 employees, and you just need one.
One.
One. You just need one, right? And that comes to the whole educational thing and making it part of everyday life and being aware, right? And that security aspect is one, but
But
compliance also entails security because to be compliant, you need to have a lot of those factors of security in. So, like,
how
you
much
know,
of it though can we balance education and self-awareness versus rules? Because let me tell you why. Let me give some context. I feel like if you put too many rules,
yeah,
it negatively impacts behavior. Because
yeah,
all you're gonna do is you're gonna have people that are just gonna figure out a way around the rules.
yeah.
Versus trusting a little bit more, a little bit less rules, but relying on intuition to make the right call.
Yes. No one really likes a lot of rules, but I'll go even further. I'll say like you can get weak links from people that are dissatisfied because their manager is too tough on them, right? The human factor is you,
So you just
you
get rid
can't
of the humans then.
yeah, you can't predict it. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna go full Terminator, but again, like for you to touch on what you said about the rules, you can remove quite a few rules and probably now utilize a lot of AI to make it easier and more bearable for the everyday worker employee to be safe, right?
So, so talk about privacy,
Yeah,
right? Because AI needs to see
it does.
that thing to protect you. But when you put rules like GDPR in place
Yeah,
that prohibit the ability for technologies to see,
yeah.
like there's got to be a balance at some point.
It's a tough one, and the whole data thing is really really tough also with the whole AI thing because AI needs to see and needs to be trained and needs to look at your data and train. And where does that data go? And you go into the whole data sovereignty thing, and all right, where's the server? Where is it sitting? What country is it in? Is it like compliance becomes hella complicated once you go down that rabbit hole and try
Right.
and figure out okay, what's happening here. Um, Transparency though, you need to be like it needs to be transparent.
And then how much of it is peer pressure too? Like let's go down this rabbit hole. How much of it is like have you seen Agents of Shield?
Yes, brief, yeah, just
It's a show that kind of bridged what happens
in
between
the
the
series,
Avengers
yeah,
and the movies. Yeah, there was a there was a the antagonist in the show. They had a sign or a saying, "Your compliance will be rewarded." So you basically have to do what you're told to do, right? So
right.
how much is it? How much of compliance is bad management? Not forget the bad employees or good employees, but just bad leaders, bad CEOs,
A
bad
lot, a lot,
CIOs.
a lot, a lot, a
So
lot
how,
of it.
why do we get them there? Why are
Uh,
they there?
the
Where's the compliance rules on who what
we're the right people to be in the right positions, I guess, but that's like a whole different story. We'll probably need another hour for another time. Different theme of channel though. Might get deep.
but yeah, but I feel like a lot of the compliance still comes with the fact that you got to comply not to the rules, but to the
Yeah,
rules that your management is telling you. Because let's face it, most of us need our job.
yeah. And to be fair, like who set those rules, and are those rules really necessary, and have we really looked through those rules and decided collectively that those are the right rules that we want to follow and we will comply with those rules. Probably.
That's what I'm telling you. We need that world, kind of like the World Health Organization. We need the World Compliance
Yeah,
Organization,
yeah. Democratize compliance, please.
essentially. But I just feel like you can't trust humans at any point, though.
Yeah, again, it's that's the factor, that's the unknown. You can't trust them, but you have to trust them, right? And like you have to show the faith, and like it goes through us, the majority of things.
But there's
And
just so much corruption, right? Like even let's just assume you had a really good compliance manager.
right,
Right? Remember, we're going back. Like let's just say we do. Let's just say somebody that did grab that short stick actually loved that job,
yeah,
right? What happens if a kid gets abducted or like ransomware for them, right? Like you
yeah,
don't think they're gonna do whatever they gotta do for their family?
yeah, definitely. Hopefully, we never cross that path, but like
I'm way too cynical, aren't I?
hopefully I don't know what you've seen in your life, Alex, but uh, yeah, from a compliance level, it's the human factor is always the unknown. It's
so,
always tricky to try and make it work.
so the conclusion I'm getting from this is like there's no hope.
There is
As
hope.
long as we have humans in the loop, there is no hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're advocating for like complete AI overtake right here, but you know, um,
We should
we're
let the
gonna
robot take over.
try and do our best from a compliance perspective, and thankfully we're in an ecosystem that probably doesn't abduct people to be compliant. So,
But I see that I wouldn't say the only way, but I'll say it. Right. But I feel like the only way to really compel companies to go, hey, this compliance thing is important, is you gotta show some sort of immediate monetary gain.
it's all about the money. It's really all about the money, but sometimes CrowdStrike happens, and then you can probably utilize it and make a point, and that point might go a very long way, depending on how your practices are within a company, and if like yeah, if you're genuinely interested in the company that you work for, or the people that work within a company, or the people that are customers of a company. There's always a case to be made, and there's obviously a lot of data out there showcasing why and how much compliance is important, right? Whether like stakeholders and top management will be interested, it all depends on how lucrative it might be or how much money you might be saving them in case in the future something happens.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the point needs to be made. Like how much money are we going to make, or how much money are we not going to lose from an event?
It's just such a hard thing to sell though, right? Like I have solar panels on my house and I just got an email saying like, hey, we'll charge you $150 to clean them.
Yeah,
Right. And I'm like, well, do they really need to be cleaned? And then they're like, well, if you clean them, you're going to see an increase in
yeah.
output, right? And I'm like, but am I really gonna see? Like, there's no
Look at the
guarantee.
numbers. I'm sure there's research on that, so you can see it.
Well, there's research on compliance too yet,
Yeah, there.
right? But that's what I'm like saying. Like, until you can actually connect those two dots, right?
Yeah,
And you could clearly see the cause and the effect. I think it's a tough sell, right? Compliance is a very tough sell.
it is. It is. But I think everyone is getting warmer and warmer towards it. And as I said in the beginning of the call, I saw that in the security expo that happened in London this
And
year.
then,
Everyone was really hot on compliance, and I think it's shifting. And it's shifting probably because there's a lot of money to be made now that AI has unlocked it. So maybe that's a narrative, that's an angle right there. Um, but we're here to solve problems, right? In the compliance space. If we have to advocate for it, we'll advocate for it. Yeah, sure.
I like to tell people, better you than me.
Yeah, we'll try and do the hard work.
Yeah, because but it is very noble work, right? I think work that's very critical, work that every day, every passing day, I think more. I think once general mainstream people
Yeah,
grasp it, like once my parents are worried about compliance,
yeah,
that's when I think we've peaked.
yeah. If I ever have my dad talking to me about compliance, I'll know I've succeeded in life.
I had a friend told me today that success is measured by your progress on your goals,
Right.
not not the completion of the goal, because you're supposed to have overly ambitious goals, and the success is not finishing the goal, but rather just incrementally making progress. But that requires so much motivation and drive. Which
Yeah, motivation and drive. I translate that into money, but yeah, it's the journey.
at the end of the day, that's all it is, right?
It's all that is. But sometimes it's the journey also, right? So it's not sexy, um, but it's necessary, and that's the pillars that we work in. That's the ecosystems. That's the industry, and I think it's up and coming. So yeah, if you asked me, are we going to see a lot of progress? Maybe you can quote me in a year or 2 years time. It'll explode probably.
Maybe, but at least from a marketing perspective, you have the human emotion to help drive change. Whether
Again, yeah,
whether that's comfort.
yeah. Again, like from a marketing perspective, the way that I look at it, and because we're focusing a lot on infosec compliance, I look at it as okay, what are the problems in this space, and I try and see. All right, can I talk to you? What are your pains? What do you hate about what you do? What do you hate about compliance? What do you hate about security? And yeah, I try and address those issues. And as you said, step by step, it's a journey. I have goals, and just incrementally going towards that. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I asked. Do you know Mark Cruz?
no,
He's from Atlassian. He's like their oh boy, I can't butcher his title. He's like he basically helps the future work of teams. Like
right.
how will teams work in the future? And I always tell Mark, like, I'm like, Mark, I think you have like the hardest job in the world because your job is to literally get people to work together.
Yeah,
And that's such
definitely.
a hard job to measure success on. Like,
Yeah.
how do you know?
How do you
Right.
measure that? Like, what are your smart goals around that? Like,
Right.
it's
And I
it's
and I feel compliance is on a very similar platform where it's like, how do you measure if you're more compliant or not compliant or under compliant or on the way to compliancy? Because like you really can't until something bad happens.
yeah.
And you don't want to wait until something bad happens.
Yeah, for me, it's the baby steps that we've been talking about. For me, I guess, like, I think if I get to a point where the 20 people that I've spoken to come to me and say, you know what, those problems that I talked about, I no longer have them. I'm like, yeah, great.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
W.
like towards the right direction. Now, whether you can actually measure it like a KPI and say, you know what, I measured this improvement over the past 3 years. It's a never changing like place. The compliance will not be the same in 2 year, 3 years time.
Heck, I
To
would
your
say
point,
6 months. After this CrowdStrike, it's going to change in
yeah,
two, three
it's going to
months.
change, and it's not only CrowdStrike, and that's why I say like it'll change and it'll adapt. It will grow, and more things will come, and you know, we'll learn, and we'll try and educate people.
Well, more power again, more power to you. And I appreciate. Obviously, I'm very jaded with this. I think I've
Yeah.
had too many scars, and I think we need more optimistic people like you because if I was in charge of this, we'd go down the wrong hole real quick.
I mean, listen, I'm not in charge of the whole compliance of the whole world, but the little thing that I can do and the little thing that the team here at Upscale can do, we'll try and do it.
Well, hopefully, I didn't impress you with my conversation.
I love the conversation. It's my kind of conversation, going all over the place and talking about things.
Yeah.
Didn't go into politics, which is great. So yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we kept it good. So, anyway, Dimitris, thank you so much for joining me here. Really appreciate you taking the time.
I
I can't
appreciate
believe this hour went by way too
what
quickly.
really quickly.
So,
Thank you.
appreciate you again, and
Appreciate it, brother.
keep fighting the good fight. Is all I can tell you.
Thank you. Catch you soon.
All right.
Bye bye bye.